Welcome to Riding Mower King. In this video here, we're going to look at this big Craftsman. It's a GT5000, but a GT4000, GT3000, it's all the same thing. We're going to look at the steering issue with this. It's got steering problems. It doesn't actually turn. The front wheels don't steer. And this is a common problem that you could have with a cast iron front axle. And this could be on any tractor, you know, whether it be an MTD, this Craftsman, a lot of John Deere's this happens. If you don't keep the front axles greased, there's a grease fitting right here on either side. If you don't keep grease in there, moisture will get in there over time and it'll turn to rust. And I think that's what happened here. So we're going to have to use the torch and try and heat that up and make some space for that rust and the shaft to be in there at the same time so we can get it apart. This doesn't happen too much with the cheaper stamped steel front axles because they're not such a tight fit. They only really have contact at the top and the bottom, where with a cast iron front axle like this, you know, this whole thing is cast, and then they drill a hole down through there. You know, they drill a hole right through here. You'll see better once I get the wheels off. But, you know, it's a lot tighter fit to carry a lot more weight and do a lot more work. But if you don't keep up on the maintenance on your front axle, this is what's going to happen. So I got the hood out of the way so we can see better and I can work better. I took the wheel off because obviously I'm going to be heating this up here. I'm going to use the torch because it's going to take heat to get that apart. So we got all the steering arms out of the way now. This one here is a tie rod, just goes to the other wheel. That wheel actually turns. Well, that's good. That means I only have to do one side. This side here, this side's frozen. This arm right here, this goes to the steering gear up to the steering wheel. So this is the one arm and this joint that makes the whole thing turn. Now, since this joint goes into this shaft like that, once this rubber seal wears out, you get moisture in there. That was stuck. It's loose now. But we're going to put some grease in there so that lasts longer, so that doesn't wear out. Because that's there's no grease left in there. So we're going to see if we can get that lubricated up, get some more life out of that. So luckily, we only have to worry about this arm here. The steering shaft, that turns back and forth no problem. So there's really not a problem back there. All our problem is right in here. Now the customer said that they've been greasing that, but the grease is only going to go where there's space for the grease to fit. So everywhere that it's full of rust, you're not going to get any grease in there. So if you look right here, all this brown around here, that's from rust that's inside here. And, you know, that's a telltale sign that you have a problem. So if you have a cast iron front axle and you're starting to see a little bit of rust like that, you need to take this apart and get some grease in there. Get it all cleaned out, get all the rust out of there with a wire brush or sandpaper, something like that. And take this whole shaft out. Inside here is the shaft. And get all the rust off of there so you got nice clean metal. So now we got to get this cap off. This is real similar to the cap that goes on the end of the shaft. It's a little bit shorter, but you have the same thing inside there, a snap ring to hold it together. It's a little chilly out here, so this is not as flexible as it should be. If it was sunny and 80 out here, this would come right off. But so we're gonna We're going to do what we can to save it, and if I can't save it, it doesn't matter. I have others. So if you have your mower out of shop getting this done, don't be surprised if they say you need some new caps. Because you want to keep these on. That's going to help keep the moisture out. Although this tractor may never have been greased in its early life. And I'm really thinking that that's what the problem is. That it ran out of grease, and then it became a problem, and then somebody started to put grease into it. But this here it's pretty dirty. So this needs to just come apart, and we're going to do the other side and make sure that that one stays good. You know, so that's not a problem in another year or two. So we're definitely going to take care of the other side. There probably won't be a video on that. You know, we're just going to make a video about the one that's a problem here. Now this is only the second time I'm using my new torch. And it's a Harbor Freight torch. And it's got a fairly small tip on it. So hopefully it's got enough to heat all this up. It'd be nice to have a rosebud tip, but I don't have one. And Harbor Freight didn't seem to have one for the small torch that I have. But we're going to give it a go, see what we can make out of it. I got this little extension here to put on the end to help work it back and forth once it gets hot and starts to give. Got my little friend there to help. All right, fire in the hole. Need more fire. There we go. Now a little less fire. Add a little oxygen. That sounds like it might get hot. Now, if you're doing this in your shop, especially if you have a wooden floor like I do, you definitely want to have a fire extinguisher close by. I have a garden hose over there, so we should be good. And you want to not point the flame upwards at the engine, because there's some wiring up there and some plastic that could easily get over hot. So you can see I'm already cooking some grease out up at the top here. But that's really not the purpose. We need to get this hot so it expands and gives us a little more space inside. It looks hot when you have the flame right on it. But it'd be nice to get this glowing. You know, maybe it won't need quite that much, but we're going to find out. Of course, the grease wants to flame up when you put the torch on it. Now, you could try putting penetrating oil in there, like PB Blaster or something like that, and let it soak down through, but there's really not much space for it to go. And if it's already filled up with grease, the grease is going to keep it from going through there. So that's why we're going right for the heat, right for the hot wrench. Because to get it loose with penetrating oil, it could take a couple weeks before you see any progress. And I just really don't think that it would work at all, given the circumstances that it doesn't turn anymore and it is full of grease. So I really don't feel like any penetrating oil is going to get in there. Well, we'll see what we get out of this little tip. If we don't get enough, I'll have to get a bigger tip. The cast iron's actually starting to turn color now. It's actually getting pretty hot. Put our little extension on here and see if it's ready to come loose. Oh, look at that. It is ready to come loose. Oh, look at that. It's even coming out. Well, that's nice. That actually worked out pretty good. Yeah, there's a lot of rust in there. Well, we're going to take a little break here. Let this change temperature to where I can touch it without burning my fingers off. And we're going to come back. So that was like 5 minutes of heat with the little Harbor Freight Olson portable torch kit with the little tanks, and this tip is a 0. That's a pretty small hole there. I'm used to using a 1 or a 2 where I work at, you know, which definitely gets a lot bigger flame. But for this here, for this front axle, this little Harbor Freight torch did the trick. It actually came out easier than what I thought it would. So here you can see, it's shiny there, but I'm pretty sure that's mostly rust. Yeah, that's flaking right off. So that's mostly rust there. That's been compacted to the point where it got shiny. So we're going to call that a win. And like I said, once it cools down, we'll come back and clean it up real good to where that can go right up in there and turn nice and easy. And then, you know, we'll take the other side apart. But like I said, that may not be on the video. Video will be long enough with getting this side all cleaned up and working the way it should. So we'll see you in a couple seconds. All right, and we're back. So now we are going to clean this out, try and get all the rust and residue out of that. Then we're going to clean off this shaft here. Now ideally you would have a wire brush on a drill or a 1/4 inch grinder, you know, a little angle die grinder. So that's a little bit too big. We're going to go with the round file. You can clean this out a little bit. This is one of those times where you wish you had something that you have at work, like a little 1/4 inch die grinder with a little shaft coming out of it with a slot, and you put some sandpaper in there, like maybe 80 or 100 grit sandpaper, and you run it down in there. It'll polish that up in no time. But since most homeowners probably wouldn't have an air die grinder anyway, we're going to make do with what I do have, which would be more likely that the regular homeowner would have. So this all feels pretty smooth. It's like maybe most of the rust is actually on here. But we are going to run this brush through here at least. This will help break up anything that the file didn't get. Of course, a bigger brush, bigger diameter would be perfect. And don't forget to get at the very bottom, because you got this half up here, you got a little bit of gap for the grease, and you got a whole nother bottom part to do yet. So you want to make sure that you don't forget about that. just to try and get that as clean as possible. Get as much actual rust out of there as what we can, within reason. Now we'll hit this with the wire brush real quick and see what happens. Yeah, it's a good holder right there. For part of it anyway. Oh, I hate when that happens. Well, maybe it's not the best holder. Just to get the loose, flaky stuff off. So here you can see that that's a little shiny, but that's really shiny there. That's actual rust. See, that's all the stuff that needs to come off, because that's taking up too much space. And there's actually a washer down here where there's supposed to be one here. Now we can actually see it. Really rusty there. That's those where you saw the brown rust coming out the bottom. That was part of that, was that washer. And here you see that the really shiny parts that I pointed out, they're starting to disappear, because that's actual rust that was really, really compressed, and it's really smooth in here, so it gave it a nice shiny finish. Like these pieces right here, they need to go away, just like that. Now, even though I'm using a file, I'm trying not to take any metal off of here, just the stuff that's sticking up too far. Any high spots, which is really going to be the rust. Let's see what we can do for down here on the bottom. Get that cleaned up some. We'll go back with the file on that. Once we're done, there's going to be plenty of grease on here that it's not really going to rust again. A little bit of penetrating oil like that when you're cleaning a shaft like this, even if you're using Scotch-Brite, penetrating oil helps pull that last little bit of rust off of it, and then you come out with a pretty nice finish. So there you can see it's not polished or anything like that, but it's nice and smooth. So at this point it's ready to go back together. Well, let's clean up this washer a little bit. Probably going to end up just putting a different washer on. Yeah, let's see if I got a better washer than this. Well, this wheel here, this washer here is actually for on the wheel side. It actually goes on this way, on here, to help hold the wheel on. But we're going to put it on here. It's probably harder than that other washer, so it's going to work out even better. So now that fits right up in there. Got a little bit of play to it, so it's got plenty of space for grease to go. Let's get a little bit of grease in there, just to make sure it goes through there. Oh yeah. There you can see we got grease going through there. So we're going to put this back on. We're going to use the one that came off of here instead of the one for the wheel. Now we're going to wipe it off a little bit first. Get the dirty grease off of there. There we go. That's that, and here's the clip for it. So now we'll put this up here. Now here's a little tip that I like to use that probably a lot of people don't think about. I like to jack up the front end to grease this, because when it's down on the tires, it's up like that. So when you put grease in there, the grease is going to go wherever it can, and it's going to come out the top pretty easy. If you jack it up, you take the weight off of it, and now the grease can actually come down the bottom. It can come out the bottom, because you definitely want grease down here to be in there, so when this rotates, you got some lubrication for here and also up there. So I always like to jack up the front end before I grease this. That way you can work this up and down. You can get grease all the way around it instead of just where it can fit, because the grease is going to go to the easiest place. So that's a nice little tip there. Jack up the front end before you grease it, and then, you know, it's easier to rotate the tires. You know, you steer it back and forth, get the grease everywhere. So there you can see how far it's moving before I really put any grease in. So now we're going to put some in here. It'll come out both ends. It's already coming out the top right there, and it's coming out the bottom right here. So if I push that up, you see we got all that grease on the bottom there. Now, yes, we have more grease than we need, but this is one of those times where too much grease is not a bad thing. So here you can see how easy that's turning. We got grease everywhere. It's still coming out the bottom, but we got it everywhere. It's coming out the top. So I'm going to put a little more grease in. I'm going to hold it up. See if we can make sure that we're getting grease out of the top for sure. Still wanting to come out the bottom too. But that's good. That means we got space for grease. Now it turns nice and easy. So now when we put our tie rod end back on, they'll both be turning together. Then we can put the steering arm back on and actually steer with the steering wheel. Now, I said I was going to put a little something in here to try and loosen this up, and we're going to do that. It's actually not as stuck as I thought it was, but it does have rust in there. So we're going to put a little bit of this on there to try and loosen it up. Then we'll pack some grease in there. There we go. Now we've got some good movement there now. Put a little bit of grease on that. It's not really greasable. The best you can do is hope to put a little lubrication in there. You know, some lithium grease or something like that. Maybe some chain lube. Just something to get down in there and be a little bit of lubrication. Now we'll get this back on here. There we go. So now we should be able to turn the steering wheel, and everything should turn real nice. Well, it turns till it hits the jack. Oh, I didn't tighten the other. That arm's loose yet. That's got to tighten down some more. I thought I had this tight, but it's still pretty loose. We'll have to go a little more on that. Now it's tight. There we go. Yeah, that's the steering arm is hitting, the tie rod end is hitting the jack under there. That's why it only wants to go so far. Well, we'll get the wheel back on here. Well, we got to put the cap on. Maybe. It's getting chilly out here. Might have to put the cap on tomorrow. Take it in the house and let it warm up, so it can be flexible. There we go. It's actually back on. It's not pretty, but it's functional. Now I'll put this washer on. I'm going to put this clip here back on. Time for another one of these. It's cold out here, but this thing is just dried out. Well, I can't find another cover right now, but that will get a cover on it tomorrow when I have more time to find one. So let's put a little grease in the other side quick. Yeah, this one moves pretty nice. And it does move up and down. Now, there's no grease out of the bottom. There's plenty of grease at the top, but there's no grease out of the bottom. So with this hanging like this, it'll be easier for grease to come out of the bottom. Yeah, we got some good movement there. So this one's not hanging up inside at all. Plus, you could see when I was moving the tie rod in, it steered pretty good. But now that it's able to get grease down to the bottom, yeah, we got more grease coming out right there. Yeah, we got plenty of grease in there now. Yep, it turns nice and easy. Maybe a little bit of play up here. The steering shaft is going to get a little bit of attention too. We're not going to forget about that. But right now we got the front tires, the front wheels steering pretty good. Except for this binding up, it steers pretty easy. So we will come back and look at the steering shaft possibly tomorrow, because that's binding up a little bit, so we're going to see about possibly changing something in there. Okay, we're back here for the second part of working on this Craftsman GT5000 garden tractor, where we're going to replace this steering gear that goes at the bottom of the steering shaft. Okay, Craftsman GT5000, we're back on this again. We got the steering gear, goes on the bottom of the steering shaft. Well, right next to the bottom of the steering shaft. And sometimes these teeth get worn. We're going to put this one on because the one that's on here has some worn teeth, which makes it skip when you're trying to steer. So this here is what it looks like. You know, just got this shaft. There's a washer down here at the bottom. And these teeth, they get worn. When your front axle gets rusty and doesn't want to turn, these teeth here take a beating. So we're going to get this replaced. So now where this goes is down here all the way at the bottom. And luckily, without the battery, it's not that hard to get to, believe it or not. It's really, really not that bad. But right in there, I'll turn the shaft. So if you look behind the shaft, you'll see that nut, that bolt head there. And that screws right into the top of that shaft that we're going to take out. We're going to take that bolt out And that whole piece I just showed on the camera is going to drop right out of there. Now underneath that bolt head, there is some washers to take up space. So you need to make sure you don't lose any of those. Now here's what I'm going to use. I'm going to use this extension. It's like a 12-inch extension. And that's an impact universal. And the nice part about that is these do not bind up like a regular universal does. So we're going to go behind the battery here. And we're going to get right on top of that bolt there. Eventually. Now we're on there. Now I'm going to have to put the camera back where it was. So like I said, without the battery in the way, it's not too bad to get to. Break that loose like that. So here's the bolt and the regular washer. And these three here are like shims. We'll put those there. And it did drop down a little bit. But we have to go around the belt on the bottom. So we got to move the belt out of the way. So we'll put the brake on, give us a little more slack there. And then we just move the belt a little bit and it drops right out. With a little help from gravity. So this sits in the tractor just like this. This bushing's in the bracket. I might have a new bushing. And it just slides up through like that. So I'm going to clean this up. We don't want any rust. And we're going to put a little grease on there. There should be a bushing at the top also. That's a little harder to see. So here's the bushing that was at the top. That one's actually in good shape yet. It's got a little bit of wear, but most of the wear was on the bottom one. All right, so now we have two good bushings. The one that was in here. And I was able to find another one. If I can find them, I'll put a link for new ones. Now we'll clean some of this rust off of here. That way the bushings last longer. I'm going to put these in here real quick so I don't forget about them. The top one goes down from the top, and the bottom one goes up from the bottom. Now we're going to put the steering arm on, because it's just a lot easier to do it right there. So 9/16 for the nut, and 1/2 inch for the stud underneath. Just like that. If you want to do it underneath, it's going to be harder. So here we can see how there's some wear on these teeth, especially from that side there. See, that one's actually broken off. That one's starting to break off right there. And that one even has some wear. So when you're going over top here, these are a little bit shorter. And with all the resistance that was in the axle to turning, that made it that the teeth were skipping. The worn bushing, the worn teeth, and all that resistance, the steering was just not functional at all. And these are not bad as far as, linear movement that way. So this bar is still, the steering arm is still usable. The steering link is still definitely usable. So now when we put this together, we want to make sure that the steering wheel's straight and that the wheels are straight. Otherwise, your steering wheel is going to be crooked. Yes, it's adjustable a little bit, but we're going to make it so it matches up to begin with. So now I'm going to have to hold that up under there while I put the bolt and the washers down from the top. So that might be a little bit of a challenge. So now we're going to put a little grease on here. This is wheel bearing grease, so it's nice and thick. It'll stay there for a while. You don't want to go crazy though. You don't want to collect in dirt, which is going to happen a little bit anyway. Really not sure how I'm going to do this, but we'll figure something out. And we go around the belt, and we go through the first bushing, and we get to the second one, and we line up with the gear, and it's up there. Kind of back up here figure out where this is in here. Set the washers on it, because they're what's going to help hold it all the way up against. Get this guy started in here, maybe. The trick is to do it without dropping anything. Of course, you got to feel with your fingers. There's actually a square right here, a plastic square. I could probably take that off and look in there. All right, so it's started. I might be able to turn it by hand from down here. We'll use this here to hold everything up. Yeah, I can reach it. So I'm going to turn it in by hand so that the washers stay lined up. Then I'll use the ratchet and the socket to tighten it up the rest of the way. So I think we're ready to tighten it. I know you can't see all that well, but trust me, it's in here. If you took it out, you'll know where it's at. All right, I'm going to lube the bottom of the shaft a little bit here and a little bit at the bottom. And I'm going to use chain lube because this lubricates and it's thicker than WD-40, which is not used for not meant for lubrication. So we're going to use a little chain lube. It's a little thicker. It's going to stay on there. So now here we'll be able to see that we went from something that the wheels did not turn at all to something that's actually drivable. So we turn it to the right, turn it to the left, not skipping anywhere, turns fairly easy, even without moving. So that's a win right there. So we got this steering back in order the way it should be. And the customer's going to be real happy about that because he needs to use this tractor. Now there is something else that I noticed that we're going to take a look at real quick. So what we're going to look at real quick, I was able to push this with the brake on, even with it in gear, because when you put the brake on, it releases the drive belt, so the pulley can actually turn. Now the brakes work if you push the pedal down all the way, but where the brakes are at with the parking brake on, you can still move it. So we're going to see if we can take a quick look at that. Hopefully it's just a brake adjustment. So on these transmissions, the brake is on the left side here. And it appears that this one is out of adjustment. So we're going to have to take the whole brake off and see if we can get some internal adjustment on this brake mechanism. The linkage is adjustable, but this arm travels all the way to the stop already. So we can't tighten up the rod on the outside. We have to go inside the caliper part, see if we can get adjustment out of that. If this was a regular transmission for a riding mower, you could just tighten a nut on the pivot shaft and move the whole lever in farther. This one here is a little bit different setup the way it looks. There's no adjustment on them that I can see on the outside. Oh no, it don't want to come out. Okay, so we're going to take the easy way out of this. All right, so we're going to take this whole shaft out, the whole rod that goes back, and it connects right there with that cotter pin. So we're going to take that cotter pin out. We're going to take that whole rod out. That way we get the rest of the brake mechanism out where we can look at it and figure out what the adjustment's going to be. Now when you put this back in, you got to make sure that it goes over and under everything that it did before. As long as this rod don't get stuck on anything. We'll give a quick look. Yeah, I can see where it hooks up. I can see where it hooks on the other end. So there is an adjustment screw there. I did try to put an Allen wrench in there, but the one I used was way too big. And here we can see that it's threaded on the inside. So we need that to be in farther. We need to be in this way farther. So we're going to turn that and see what happens. So the size for this, yeah, it's worn off. I can't read it there. So I'll have to read it on here. Looks like this is a 5/32 Allen wrench here. So we're going to try turning this and see what happens. Yeah, it just popped right out of there. So really, I think we want to go this way. Ah, that's just going to take this off. So this is still not an adjustment here. So this is going to get our lever off. Here we can see the lever only goes one way. Well, it's got these flats on it. That's going to be the adjustment. The spline's on here. So when this is on here, the lever turns that shaft there and makes it go in. So when we turn this, this here would be like operating, and this here would be when you put the brake on. So you'll see that this centerpiece comes in and pushes against the brake pad. So we need to adjust that so it's in a little bit closer without going over. Because if you step on the brake and it jumps over to the next one, it's not gonna, your pedal's gonna stay down. So in the process of taking this apart, these two pieces fell out. This here is your actual pad, and this here is a backing plate. This so-called piston here pushes against this metal, and it's nice and thick, so you get even pressure against your pad without breaking it. So this is how they were. This goes in like this. The dirt's on top. And it goes on the top of the rotor. So it's going to go in facing like this. That's how it's shaped. That's how you know that's how it goes. So we get about that much movement, and then it goes over the top. So it can go in about that far. So we're going to put our lever back on here. We're going to start with the lever being straight up and down, basically straight up and down. And we're going to move the lever like that, and we're going to hope that that's enough movement. Boy, it would be nice if this was a little bit easier to get to. You need to put two hands in there, and there's not space for one. All right, so this here is your easy adjustment that you make just by going right in the back here. So we're going to put this back towards the center where it normally is when everything is new. And then if we need to, we'll tighten it up from there. I have to use the wrench because this nut is like an interference fit, so it doesn't come loose. And then they put a jam nut on there just for good measure. All right, so now we're back, and the sun went away. I don't know if that's going to help with being able to see anything or not. So I got this assembled, and if the transmission was over here, this is the rear of the tractor. I have the arm to the rear a little bit. Knock the tape off. Well, the arm's going to go this way, and there's a bracket in there that the arm hits. So now the arm should have plenty of travel. And I put some tape on here just to hold that in. Now, I know there's going to be comments, oh, you can't put anything on the brakes. This tape's going to wear away. It is possible I can pull this out once I have this mounted in there. It's just that you need to put this in there and put the screws in without this pad falling out. So I'm going to cheat and put tape on it, and we're going to see how it works. One thing that I don't like is when people do a video, they put something together and they don't show how it went together. So I'm going to attempt to do that here. So I took this screw out, this arm came off, this spring came out. Now, on this end of the spring, right here, there's a little hook, and the best place for that to fit is right there. And the long end of the spring, I put through this hole right here. So this is gonna, there's tension on that. That spring is pulling that arm back so the brakes release all the way. And that's what you want. So that's really the best place to put the end of that spring. But I just wanted to show how this assembly actually goes together. Hopefully it's in focus. So this here's the shorter end of the spring right here. This is the longer end going through that hole. And I'm going to put it in with this a little bit to the rear of center. I think that's 2 splines to the rear of center. And this hole here, when you go to put the screw in this on the front of the transmission, there's actually 2 holes on the front. You need to go with the lower one so that it clears the clears the gas tank, and so that it's on the rotor where it needs to be. And the other giveaway is that this screw here needs to line up with this hole. So if you put it in the wrong hole in the front, it's not going to line up. So you can put an Allen wrench in there to adjust the lever position. So we will try this again. So the end result of this adjustment here, this is going to get the lever where it needs to be, which really is what it needed in the beginning. But I had no history on this tractor, so I wanted to make sure that there was actually brake pads in there and that they weren't wore out. So now we can see that the brake's working good, like it's supposed to. So now we need to put this in here. So this shaft's going to go in like this. That's going to be facing to the left. And it's going to come back through that arm, and we're going to put on the spring, the washer, and the 2 nuts. So we're going to try and feed it up through here to where it needs to go. It actually needs to go right in there. I can see the lever in the front from back here. So I know I'm at a good spot, and I'm right where it needs to go. So now we can pull it out, put the spring on. The spring goes right against the arm. And we put the washer on here. And we put the first nut on. It's actually a nylock nut. So we put this one on first. And we'll have to figure out where it needs to go to. Somewhere around there. And we put this one on. Threads are a little bit messed up right there. Then we put this forward again. Let it rest right there. Then we'll come up here. We'll release the brake a little bit. We'll put this lever back through this hole. Now we'll put the parking brake on and see if it holds. So no, like that, it's not holding. If we go up to there, why is it still not holding? Okay, so we need to tighten up that nut in the back, put more tension on that spring. So we're gonna put the arm back. That's why I didn't put the cotter pin in there. So I'm going to put that brake in the lock position, and I'm going to push this up through here to where it goes into that arm, so I can get an idea how far I got to tighten up this spring. So pretty far, because I can put the other end of this rod in front of that. So we're going to go somewhere up here. Hopefully we don't end up where we were the first time. If we do, that means I need to move the arm back another notch on that shaft. So let's hope we don't have to do that. Yeah, we still need to go pretty far. So I'm going to move that arm back. We're going to come back out on this adjustment here. We're going to move that arm another one. Another spline on that shaft. See what happens. All right, enough playing around with that Allen wrench. We're going to use this. Because it's getting late and it's starting to rain. And I want to be done with this 5-minute job. So we're going to move that lever back. One more tooth on the splines. So we just need more travel. We need it to move a little bit further. All right, let's see what we got here. Now we're at the same place. Well, that didn't work. I need to go back. It's a little hard to tell if it actually went back or not. So we need to go again. All right, now I can tell it went back another notch. All right, so now I can put a whole finger between that arm and the crossbar that it was hitting before. That's the problem that we had before. It was hitting and it couldn't travel any farther forward. So now it can. Now we'll put it together in the front and see where we're at. Well, it works if the pedal's all the way down, but now we should be able to just turn this nut and get some adjustment, because you should feel that spring compress when you're pushing the pedal down. Before you get all the way down, you should feel tension where you're pushing on that spring. Because when you put the parking brake on, the pedal comes back a little bit to lock the arm, to lock the lever that holds it there. So you need to have that spring compressed a little bit. There we go. Now we're getting there. We're just about there, but I want a little bit more tension on that spring. I think we're going to go with that right there. So now we got the brake lever all hooked up. We got it adjusted in the back where I want it. Now when we get down to right about here, I can feel there's tension on that spring. And if I hold the lock lever up for the parking brake, I have to go all the way down to there, and I can feel there's tension. So now the parking brake actually holds it. So now I can give it back to him, and I don't have to worry about him parking somewhere on a grade with his trailer on the back and it's starting to roll away. So now for everybody that waited till the end of the video to see if I was going to put a cover back on that, this is another one here. This one's nice and flexible. I had it in the house for a while. So yes, I'm remembering to put a cover on that. And when they're not dried out and hard, they go on nice and easy. Just like that. So we're going to call this one a success. We got the brakes working, which it didn't come for. And we got the steering working, which it did come for. So for the steering, we used the torch on the front, on the axle, to get the arm out of there, because it was rusted in the axle. It couldn't turn. And we put a new steering gear on the bottom down under the shaft, because this one's wore out. So now it's ready to go back to work. He's going to put his battery in. He wasn't worried about it running. He said I didn't need to worry about that. Just steering, and we threw in a brake repair as a bonus. So it's all ready now. So if you like these kind of videos where, you know, hopefully I can show you how something works and how it goes back together, or how to figure out what's wrong with it, you know, hit the subscribe button, because I'm definitely going to be having more of these videos throughout the summer. We'll see you in the next video.